This story takes place in 1986 when I was a freshman in high school, or excuse me, a freshman in college. And now I feel terrible because I really am aging, because I'd fancied that Will and I were somewhere close in age, and in fact I'm apparently 13 years older than he is. All right, so I lived a sheltered suburban existence. I stayed away from the party scene that my rich suburb got into, knowing full well that I would go away to college one day and I would be able to turn into whatever I want. So I waited, and I got my college acceptance, and at my rich, posh suburban high school, about 25% of my graduating class went on to the University of Michigan, where I went to school. And I knew that there were all going to be all these people from my high school there, and I knew that I was going to leave them behind and become something completely different. And I got my acceptance, and I got my sign-in for my orientation and so forth, and it was July 30th, 1986. I can still remember this, because I was going to get to finally go off to college, and I was going to get to leave these other people behind, and I was going to get to turn into the thing I wanted to turn into, which I really wasn't quite sure what that was, only it involved a lot of sex. And so when I found out about my orientation group, somebody at my high school collated all of this information and sent out phone calls saying that I was going to be in the same orientation group with a bunch of other people from my high school, specifically 3 popular guys who were frankly just kind of douchebags. And I didn't really want anything to do with them, but it was going to be kind of a small venue, so I was going to be friendly and everything. And for months, this happened in something like March, and then for months I had July 30th, 1986 as the day that I was going to get my first taste of freedom. I was going to go to the orientation group. I was going to drink too much, tell a lot of lies, and hopefully end up, I don't know, lying on a tennis court somewhere with somebody in the middle of a freezing Michigan night. It never really worked out. Anyway, so I'm in this orientation group with these 3 popular douchebag guys, and I'm like, okay, well, I can deal with that. July 30th arrives. I get dropped off in the college town in Ann Arbor, and I'm really excited, and I spot popular douchebag number 1, and I'm like, hey, how's it going? And he bursts into tears, and we're talking like big football player douchebag, the exact opposite of the sort of guy you would think would burst into tears. And I'm like, okay, never one to be very comfortable with emotions, ask my wife. I was sort of like, what do I do here? And I turn, and there's popular guy number 2. And I'm like, what's up with? And then he bursts into tears. And I'm like, what the hell? What has happened here? What kind of world have I entered? And only gradually and with much weeping does the story come out that the night before, there had been some kind of party, and it ended up with popular guys number 1, 2, and 3, none of whom were college-bound, in a car. Popular guy number 1 at the wheel was apparently drinking out of a whiskey bottle, so you can kind of guess where this one is going. The truck rolled and hit a tree, and popular guy number 2 was killed in the accident, and popular guy number 3 was paralyzed from the waist down in the accident. Now, I knew the kid who was driving and really didn't like him. He was, of course, completely unhurt. I knew the kid who died, but only really, really vaguely. I'd probably had 2 conversations with him the whole time through high school. Decent enough guy, we just weren't in the same demographic. He was kind of basically your affable stoner type, and I was the nerdy superachiever. And popular guy number 3, the guy who was paralyzed, I knew a little bit better, but still not very well. Still not well enough to sit there and weep like these 3 popular douchebag guys who I'd considered 2-dimensional for my entire life were doing. And so I'm like, okay, hugs, manly half hugs. I don't know what to do here. I have no real experience with death. My parents are still alive. In fact, they left a phone message singing happy birthday to Eleanor on the phone just now. And so I don't have this kind of experience of how to deal with this kind of strong emotion. And also, I'm a little bit resentful because this whole thing is raining on my parade, damn it. This is my college orientation. And I'm trying to feel guilty about feeling disgruntled about this whole thing, and not doing all that great of a job. Well, somehow a great deal of alcohol was procured because, of course, the best way to grieve your friend who just died in an alcoholic car crash was to get as drunk as possible. And then for the rest of the night that I had planned that I was going to sort of metamorphose, I wound up being the sort of hug target and not incidentally the vomit target for these three douchebag and now weeping and terribly broken up because they were actually close friends with the dead kid, popular guys. And then I got to talk to girls, but only because the girls felt sad because the cute popular guys were sad, and maybe if they talked to me, I could get them an in with one of these grieving popular guys. The whole thing was frankly kind of a nightmare, and I felt bad about feeling bad because I had come here to leave these people behind, and suddenly I was appointed their secretary, and throughout the orientation weekend, I was the one who had to pick up all the goddamn folders and so forth for them because they were too busy either grieving, drunk, drinking, or hungover, and couldn't do it. And I hate bureaucracy. And here I am picking up folders for something like 4 people. And it was terrible. And I felt bad because I didn't really feel all that bad. I mean, I felt like, oh, he was a decent enough guy, all 2 conversations I had with him. And I felt bad because these people were obviously really grieving about it. But I was also, like I said, a little bit disgruntled about the whole thing. But orientation ended. There was a funeral. And by the way, the affable stoner guy was buried with his tin of Skoal in his pocket. So we're all buried with something. Fast forward 2.5 years or so, and I've gone through several metamorphoses, although in retrospect I was pretty much stuck in the pupil stage, not P-U-P-I-L, because I was a terrible student, but P-U-P-A-L. I think I was somewhere in the crunchy goth phase at this point. I'm not really sure. And so I end up at a party, and there is a girl I had sort of a distant crush on in high school, but didn't really know all that well, hence the distant crush. And we get to talking, and there's clearly some kind of chemistry going on there. And so naturally, I proceed to deal with this by having entirely too much to drink. And we end up kind of wandering around. And she starts telling me this story. And it turns out that she was at the party that the 3 people had left in the truck. And that resulted in the death of one kid and the crippling of another. And she had been dating the kid who died, not very closely, but had been dating him. And he had been acting like a drunk douchebag at the party. And so she had, in her own words, left him behind. She had got a ride from somebody else who was sober enough to drive her car, and they took off, leaving him with no other choice but to accept a ride from kid number 1 who was drinking at the wheel, who everybody knew was the sort of kid who was going to drunkenly roll a car someday. And that she had lived with the guilt from this for the last 2 years. That she had, in some extremely tangential way, been responsible for this poor kid's death. And and I just sat there and had to listen to it. And I was taken back 2 years again because here I have metamorphoses. I don't talk to anybody from high school at this point. They've all gone off in different directions. All the 100 or so people from my high school class that went to my college. I don't really see these people anymore. Occasionally I'll see one of the 3 popular douchebags, but by this point they've recovered their douchebagatoire, and they aren't going to talk to me because I've seen them crying. And they don't want, obviously not. And yet here I am 2 years later thinking I've left the whole thing behind. And, oh, here's this cute girl I've kind of had a crush on distantly for a long time. And she's going to sit and tell me the same story too. And I ended up feeling that I had to atone to the dead kid because his death had caused me all of these kind of stupid narcissistic problems. And his own parents were suffering. I can't imagine what that would be like to have your teenage kid killed in something like that. And so in a kind of ritual thing, I'd been reading a lot of sort of Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces sort of things. I went and bought myself a tin of Skoal, and I buried it on the university quad. And that was how I tried to give a tribute to this dead kid I didn't really know that persisted with me for so many years. Thank you.